One of the other sports that we have talked about a lot here over the last several weeks has been the NFL, because there's been some decisions come down and some suspensions come down, that some that we agree with, some that we don't. And you were able to have the team over there talk with Matthew Holt, one of the guys that has founded a company in which the integrity of the game, we talk about this all the time. We are very, 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 very into the fact that, listen, is the NFL rigged, and NBA and all these people want to say, like, no, absolutely not. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the integrity of the game, but we are talking about some of these other little smaller things, and especially if we're trying to catch some of these guys that may or may not be breaking the golden rule, which is betting on their own sport. And so you guys were able to catch up with Matthew Holt just about all the stuff that's been going on with the NFL recently.
Yeah, interesting interview with Mike Mazzio. We already ran one part of it talking about the NFL. We'll have another part of it coming here in the next couple of days, talking about some of the college betting scandals that have gone on in recent days, Iowa and Iowa State in particular. But the one about the NFL, following up on the Isaiah Rodgers suspension, is one that I think is a worthwhile read for everybody to understand not only where the future is going with this, but where we've come from. So you mentioned Matthew Holt and U.S. Integrity, and essentially what you have with U.S. Integrity is taking the knowledge that has been at sportsbooks for a very long time about how to identify not only risk, but to preserve integrity, and trying to transfer some of this to less experienced operators who might not have done it in the U.S. space in the same way. And so U.S. Integrity partners with not only sports books, but regulators to try to identify potential problems. And they were at the heart of what went on with the Alabama situation that goes back to betting in Iowa. And the takeaway that we got was that this is not the end of NFL betting probes, that there are more to come, that frankly, there are already others that are in process right now that are being investigated. And the conclusion that Matt Holt came to is that it is because regulators are no longer in the business of having to process applications and do all of the due diligence of licensure, and they have more time to spend on these investigations. Now, I think there's probably more nuance to that in the end, because I think there really is more awareness, there is more access, there are more states that have legal betting apps available, there are more players who know what these legal betting apps are, and despite the NFL's best efforts in terms of education, say that they don't necessarily know what all the rules are. It's a very interesting read in which Mike and Matt go kind of deep into the mechanics of, what's coming down the line in the future and what regulators are doing to try to be more diligent about these things. But Matt, I think that the biggest takeaway is to say Isaiah Rodgers is not the wave breaking on the shore. It is maybe more the wave beginning to crest, and there is still more to come.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if we didn't think that there was already emphasis on what you can and can't do out there, I mean, listen, it is going to be magnified 10x now, and it should be. And, listen, I've been in locker rooms, you've been in locker rooms. We mentioned this whenever this first came up with the Jameson Williams stuff. Like, this is nothing new, right? I mean, you walk in, there is stuff all plastered all over about the do's and don'ts, and gambling has been on there forever, right? I mean, like, you could literally go into any collegiate, any pro locker room, do not gamble, do not do this, do not do that, do not do this. Like, so it's, that being said, there are always going to be people who just don't care about the rules and don't worry about the rules. Or, Adam, I also think there are people who are not even malicious or whatever, who just, like, basically are, for lack of a better term, they're just kind of clueless, right? I mean, like, it's just like you read something, it doesn't quite process, and then you just move on with your life like normal. And that's not saying that that's right, and I'm not making an excuse for those people, but I think some of these instances definitely aren't malicious and aren't kind of like sticking a middle finger up to the establishment. It's just more the kind of like, whatever, and you just move on with your life. And, like, that's not the way to handle it, for sure. But now that's just not going to be, allowed. Like, this is the reason Matthew Holt and them, and the reason legalized gambling and everything exists, is because we can identify these situations and try to remedy them. And this is, like, why we continue to beat the drum for this and preach that, no, legalized gambling has not increased these acts happening. These happen and have been happening for 50 plus years. It's just now we're catching the people. This is a good thing. Overall, we are actually catching the people that are doing the thing that they're not supposed to be doing. And so, look, I'm glad that Holton team are all in on all of this. I know that they were, they were also part of the big spearheaded thing whenever they found out the stuff about the UFC, which we know led to instant changes within that organization. No longer are fighters probably shouldn't have been able to bet anyway, but like no longer are fighters able to bet. Coaches and managers can't bet either. Like, so we are making a change. And Adam, you and I, we're realistic about this. We're still kind of in the infancy here. I know it's like people who've been in the gambling industry for a long time just think that that everything's been thought of and everything's been taken care of. But look, you learn along the way. And so long as you're correcting the mistakes that are being made, and so long as you are putting in policy that is one followable, which, we talked about with the Jameson Williams stuff, and as long as it's not asinine, then, we're heading in the right direction. And there's going to be missteps along the way, but I do believe that we have a pretty good, look, man, I thought you and I would have had come on here 20 different times already talking about some sort of major disaster in this industry. And fortunately, that has not been the case. And so, I think we're doing pretty good right now.
The idea of nefarious, by the way, I think is really off in the distance, because the betting incidents that we have heard have had nothing to do, at least from what's been reported, with inside information. And that is the key concern when it comes to players. It is not so much that a player is going to affect his own performance. We've talked about this. In professional sports, there is way too much money at stake for these guys to be risking themselves. But what they know about their teammates, what they might know about the other team, is certainly the kind of inside information that could cause a problem. Now, Isaiah Rodgers, by what was reported by ESPN, was betting $25 and $50 on games. I don't care if he's betting on his own games at $25 to $50. I know that might be something that sounds, off the, beyond the pale to some people, but he's not changing what he does on the field over a $50 bet. No way, no how. The truly ridiculous part, as we've discussed, but I don't know that you and I have discussed on this podcast since this information came out. We discussed it last week. There's a report out there from one of the Lions beat reporters from one of the radio stations talking about that he has information that Jameson Williams bets were not even placed at the team facility. They were placed at the team hotel, that they were on the road, and that he was betting on a college game on the road. And that's the sort of thing where we talk about the education curve so much with players and what they need to know. To me, that's the education curve that has to take place on the side of the leagues.
Absolutely.
Because the leagues need to be able to adjust as well. This can't just be the leagues handing down dogma and players having to adjust to what the leagues say. The leagues need to be able to learn from what's going on out there and ask themselves real questions. And do we want to take Jameson Williams, potentially one of the most exciting players to come out of college last year and this year, and take him off the field for 6 games over betting on a college game from a team hotel? That seems counterproductive to your business interests.
And the other thing, and I like precedent here, right? I mean, like we have seen real actual crimes, right? I mean, like we're talking about like real actual crimes that have happened where the suspensions have been less than what we're getting for Jameson Williams for, again, allegedly betting, rumored, I should say, betting not even in a facility, in a hotel on the road. Like we have to have cooler heads prevail here. I'm praying still that some sort of appeal process will come through here and that somebody will take a look at this policy and say, like, guys, we can't just blanket across the board, just, for guys that are doing some of these other things. Now, if you want to slap him on the hand, if you want to slap him on the wrist, and I'm with you, I would rather see this policy changed and have more common sense policy in all of this. But look, if you're not willing to change the policy and you're not willing to admit that you were wrong, at least admit that you were wrong with the actual punishment. I mean, this is not worth 6 games. I mean, we are talking about a third of the season for something that is absolutely innocent. I mean, like, I think you would even agree. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I mean, this is absolutely innocent. Not betting on your own sport, not even in a team facility. You're in a hotel on the road. Like, tell me the harm here. Tell me the crime. Like, I can't wrap my brain around it.
I get that it's perception about inside information, as I talked about earlier, but in the end, it is not the sort of thing where Jameson Williams was doing this with the intention of making money off some sort of information that he had. He was doing it as a young man interested in betting. He is the target demographic for what most sports books are looking for right now. He is a young man with wealth who is interested in participating in legalized sports betting. So that, to me, is ridiculous in terms of a punishment being warranted. But I'll take your point, Matt, and I'll go one farther and say, make the punishments clear. Post the house rules on this.
Right.
Put it in a situation where it's collectively bargained, and you say, if you are caught doing X, Y, or Z, then the punishments are A, B, or C, instead of having the sort of nebulous situation that we have now where Roger Goodell can say, this one gets 4, this one gets 6, this one gets the whole season.
I agree with you 1,000,000% there. And again, I continue to hold out hope that cooler heads will prevail in this whole situation.